While discussing the complete career of Harmony Korine last year, I eventually had to contend with the future aggro-drift represented, and these were the prophetic words I uttered then. The Korine I just spent this whole video lauding may now be a thing of the past, but he can switch on a dime, so who knows. This was in reference to the mumbling vapidness of the picture that felt half-baked and overly aesthetic, his common traits and technical excellence fading into a haze. I'm not here to say that he has made a complete 180, but I am here to say that Korine is still alive and kicking in Baby Invasion. I had a suspicion that we were about to face a Trash Emperors to Spring Breakers jump with aggro drift, the loose aesthetic exploration to the finely tuned work, dare I say, masterwork. This will not be a comprehensive guide to Baby Invasion and all of its possible paths, but one man's personal experience of the work and the thoughts it has left behind. Just like my previous video, I'll start with some general information and then switch to a specifically American lens. And if you want to know why that is, you can find my complete review of Harmony Korine's filmography in this video's description. Baby Invasion was released upon the world after a few festival showings on March 21st, 2025. It primarily follows Mr. Yellow and his duck mob squad as they break into mansions, rob, terrorize, watch streams, fight bosses, and generally just mess around. It's one of those movies that is intended as an experience. That's not to say that there isn't some sort of through line thanks to the chat's nihilistic chanting, the White Rabbit, God, and depending on the version you watch, a voiceover. That's right, there are at least 2 versions of this film publicly available. During the festival run, there were discussions of many different versions that would be discovered through hidden codes within the film. None of those have come to light yet, if they even exist, and given the 2 that we have currently, I think that idea has been significantly trimmed down. One other version of the film did play in New York with 3 screens and extra AI-generated imagery on the sides, so more may be on the way. Or perhaps we're intended to make our own, as all of the base film clips and assets are available for purchase on the Edgelord store. Maybe one day we'll even get all the angles from security cameras to body cameras to truly fashion our own films. Who knows what is intended here, but the possibilities are obvious. The 2 versions we currently have are labeled as pure and impure. The impure version is the one with the aforementioned voiceover, which ethereally drifts in and out of focus throughout the runtime, adding bits of context on what the White Rabbit symbolizes and the stance we're supposed to be taking in relation to the images we are seeing. The way it softly whispers on top of the hectic images and burial soundtrack make it easy to miss, ensuring that we are never swept too far into thought. This is why it is impure. It almost counteracts the experiential nature of the film by simultaneously providing too much and too little context to add much beyond more noise. Now comes the impossible question. What are we broadly supposed to get out of either version? Both lead to the same points, albeit with more or less clarity. Surprisingly, the mission statement of this piece is laid out much more directly than in other Korine works, and the primary perspectives and principles that guided this project are stated right from the film's beginning. For the first few minutes, we witnessed an interview with a game dev who worked on Baby Invasion, which they describe as a trance, an experiment in reality and violence, and an unfortunate nightmare. This small interview tells us everything we need to know about the broad structure of this work. So let's start with trance. The word trance can primarily be taken in 2 ways, as an endorsement of how the film is designed to be experienced, and as an indictment of streaming's trance-like power. Like all of Korine's films, to different degrees of course, this film is primarily concerned with creating an aesthetic experience over a narrative one. Much like aggro drift, there is only the thinnest shred of narrative to be found here, and I dare say there is even less in Baby Invasion. Even the levels, minigames, and scoring don't seem to have any clear end or goal beyond distraction or dopamine. We never move forward or back, just laterally to something different. So if there's nothing to grab onto, then what is an audience member supposed to do? They're simply supposed to indulge themselves in mindless consumption, funny aesthetics, and burial soundtrack. And when the chat flashes by, the music hits, and the screen is filled with colorful icons, one can find themselves in a stupefied trance, which leads me to the film's indictment. I couldn't help but think of Harmony Korine's quote that "I show speed" is the new Tarkovsky during my second viewing. And I couldn't help but seeing it as the bridge from the trance-like experience intended to the critiques of streaming and gaming culture. Most likely this quote is just intended as a bit of rage bait, but I found it productive, so let's run down this bunny trail a little ways. Tarkovsky's works can be broadly categorized as slow, transcendent, and spiritual. Each of his films, when you are in the right headspace, ultimately lead to forgetting yourself in the everyday. They force us to look at the mundane until we realize the presence of God in it, thereby transcending our circumstances. Streaming in Baby Invasion is the inverse of this. We still plunge ourselves into the mire of the everyday, of the lives of others, but rather than transcend, we simply disappear. The chat never manifests itself in any real way, but instead becomes a place for cyclical, ever-present discussions to reign. Once again, we never move forward or back, just sideways. Streaming, and to some extent gaming, is seen here as a gigantic, meaningless waste of time and potential. Yet the viewer too is dragged into it, making us realize we aren't better than anyone else. We can all be hypnotized like chickens. The next set of words from this intro I would like to look at are an experiment of reality and violence. These two could be discussed separately, but more would be gained by discussing them together. At about 15 minutes in the movie, we are told that this is not a movie. This is a game. This is real life. There is no more real life. There is just now. The endless now. Obviously, a trance-like state implies a loss of self in the now. But that examination is just the first step into a broader view of society, gaming, streaming, and their ills. To start with reality, it is clear that the modern internet age, streaming, and gaming does not simply imply a loss of reality or a realization of a larger matrix, but instead a mass confusion and conflation of the two. We're both physical and ethereal beings, and everyone we interact with lies somewhere on that scale. Some are bots, some are people, and as AI gets closer, the lines blur more and more. The difficulty with confusion is that it is hard to escape. Like quicksand, it pulls us down, leading us to simple conclusions that feel good. So reality here is not gone, but rather in constant flux, leaving us with nothing to grab onto, or at the very least, only ourselves. This is evident once again in the filmmaking itself, and I was struck on my second viewing by just how much care and thought went into confusing reality, game, and everything in between. Why do we sometimes leave one game for another and sometimes for reality? And how are our protagonists both playing the game and brutalizing someone? Nihilism and narcissism are closer than we think, and they can only lead to unspeakable violence both against ourselves and others. Everyone hates saying that video games or movies or media in general cause violence, and yet this appears to be the exact argument that Korine is making here. I don't believe that someone who loves gaming and runs a studio that produces games and violent media can wholeheartedly believe this, but I do think that Korine believes that it is essential for anyone working in media and the arts to realize that while we do not cause violence, we can inspire it, give it form, and give it direction. Especially when the perfect storm of the internet or streaming or gaming dehumanizes oneself and others, depersonalizes and decorporalizes everyone, and provides violent imagery. Which leads me to the developer's final words I'd like to touch on. When describing this movie for us, the developer calls it an unfortunate nightmare, implying that it was a corruption, a product of dark web hacking. So while the trance-like state induced by gaming, streaming, and even the movies may undermine our very conception of reality and thereby pull us into confusion and ultimately toward the self, pleasure, and nihilism, it doesn't have to be this way. These characters are literal demons, amalgamations of twisted innocence mixed with our darkest fantasies of power and violence, and the presence of the developers and their worry speak to a future that is brighter. A future that can manage the boundaries between simulation and reality and control their worst tendencies. As is the case with all of Korine's works, he is concerned primarily with capturing and documenting the now, which always leaves him in a sort of purgatory, often creating beauty out of the darkness while also reveling in it to some extent. In my larger video, I said that while his stance on issues is apparent on closer examination, his entanglement with them can serve as a sort of endorsement, and he could use a stronger sense of perspective. Here, I think he did just that, because as with his other masterworks, Julian Donkey Boy and Spring Breakers, he is sitting right on the edge, unsure of what is to come, but able to notice pitfalls, trends, and opportunities, both in tech and in lifestyle. To circle back then to the simple "what does this mean" question that opened this section of the video, I believe the answer is this. The Baby Invasion Korine is telling us that while the modern age may predispose us to a loss of reality and community amidst the pleasure generated by live streams, gaming, and the internet, an opportunity still exists for great beauty and improvement, as long as we exercise our demons, or transcend instead of descend. Before briefly connecting these ideas to the four broader concepts I presented when connecting Korine to America, I want to say a few words on AI here, as it is worth mentioning. Right off the bat, I have no problem with the use of AI in Baby Invasion, and I think Korine and the Edgelord team at large have been doing marvelous work exploring the power and unique aesthetics of generative AI. They're not trying to fool us into thinking it is reality, but rather modify, twist, and corrupt, and push reality into new, uncanny, and sometimes eerily beautiful worlds. In the case of Baby Invasion, the AI use here is most obvious with the babies' faces, but it probably had a hand in a lot of the effects, and most likely the chat log. But all of this is either invisible or adds to the dissolution of reality that the film is aiming at. Faces shift and blur, and the entire chat of people may in fact just be one robot talking to itself. In short, AI is here to stay, and I believe it has been beautifully utilized here to emphasize this film's themes and point toward new possibilities. At this point, it's pointless to try and avoid it, and if we want it to be used correctly, we'll have to get our hands in there and get dirty. And this actually, over time, may prove to be one of Korine's most important contributions. But only time will tell. When discussing Korine's broader filmography and arguing for his position as the American filmmaker, I identified 4 key traits that define America: freedom, capitalism, spirituality, and difference. I won't talk your ear off explaining all the nuances and reasoning behind these terms, but instead briefly connect them to the larger video. So if you want some context, go over there. And with each of these, it is essential to remember that just like with streaming and the internet, Korine sees both the beauty and terror of each of these terms and all they encompass. Call him a fence sitter all you want. He's the only one bold enough to admit both, and one of the few to correctly identify the deeper problems we currently face in this country. It's as American as apple pie, but true freedom is a scary, evil thing. A thing that puts the self above all others, pleasure above all sensations. Just like in Spring Breakers, ultimate freedom is on display here. There are no consequences, only diversions to another pleasure. These characters can steal, kill, drug, and dance their way through life, leaving a wake of destruction behind them. The nuance added here from Spring Breakers is that of the chat, or onlookers, those who have given up their selfhood. Rather than extend to the chaos, which at least implies some community, some life, these people spiral into the nothingness of consumption. They do not exist to these streamers, to each other, or even to themselves in any meaningful way. We are moving from a nation of hedonists who, despite their faults, at least bleed, to a nation of spectators, happy to see others live the lives we once wanted, happy even to cede them the power to transcend laws and morality. Out of the 4 traits I've identified, this is the most obvious and easy to connect to baby invasion, at least to me. One tends to rob people in order to gain money to spend on what one needs or desires. Yet here, all of the robbery only seems to pump up numbers and enable the purchase of pills. The main characters can't even transgress societal norms in order to achieve something that resembles life. Money here is like an endless minigame, no end, no purpose. And just in case it hasn't sunken in yet, Baby Invasion is by far one of Korine's most nihilistic works, because even in Julian Donkey Boy, we feel something and we recognize ourselves. Korine tends to have some sort of spirituality at the core of his works, oftentimes Christianity, to point to beauty or to simply emphasize a moral element. In Baby Invasion, spirituality is primarily a moral element, as digital Jesus appears at the film's end to electrocute our demons to death, and the game dev's experience has led her to plead with God to stop the violence. The game dev's pleas remind us that we are out of our depth here, and must seemingly rely on an outside force to save us from the possible evils of the digital realm. Not only are we dissolved into pleasure-seeking nothingness, but now we can't even help ourselves and must rely on some higher power to free us from this digital age. In my larger analysis of Korine's work, this is the key element that I felt separated him from other filmmakers, as he captures the widest breadth of the American experience. This emphasis on difference evaporated some with aggro drift and continues to be misty at best here. But then again, who else is so pointedly examining online streaming and gaming culture in our day and age? Difference here still applies, just like it did with Trash Jumpers, not because we are seeing a diverse group of experiences, but because we are looking under one specific rock. Sometimes difference lies in the distance between works, not within them. And now we have reached the end of my string of thoughts on Baby Invasion, which are by no means complete, as this film's experiential opacity encourages self-direction. I didn't want to take all the fun away, just paint some broad strokes to hopefully aid your viewing. So as always, go watch it for yourself and draw your own conclusions and connections. But for me, this is Korine's latest masterwork, a perfect exploration of the idea of video game movies, reality, violence, digital nihilism, and bleeding-edge aesthetics. I doubt anyone would call it perfect, but it does exactly what it set out to do, and opens new doors in the process. What more could we ask for?